Welcome to week 2 of our Janome Sew Along, sponsored by Janome and Classic Sewing Magazine, and featuring this amazing Continental M17 by Janome. Today, we are going to do the embroidered portion of the front of our notebook cover, and then we're also going to look at how to do the built-in monogram that is on the front of it. So what we're doing first is we're doing just the in the hoop portions of just the front. We're not going to finish the cover. We're going to do just the front. Now you should have, to do that, you should have one piece of fabric that is for the spine and the back. You should have your pencil pocket that we made last week. And then you should have another piece that's about 2.5 inches wide that is your end piece for your front cover. You'll need all 3 of those. You'll also need your long piece of piping, okay? And a piece of applique fabric if you're going to use it, but we'll talk about that when we get to the applique. So what I have done in my hoop so far, you can see I've got some polka dot fabric here in my hoop. I've done the first 2 steps of our embroidery already. They're very simple. All you have to do there is your first stitch is going to be stitched on just stabilizer. Now, I have hooped the medium cutaway stabilizer in my hoop, and I'm also using all of the little magnets that come with your hoop to make sure that that stabilizer stays nice and steady during this entire process. We're going to be doing quite a few different things in this hoop, and you don't want anything to slip. So the stabilizer's in the hoop, the magnets are on the hoop holding that stabilizer in place. Now, our polka dot fabric here, this is our back and spine fabric. And what happens is your first color change is going to stitch a line just directly across toward the bottom of your hoop. It'll just go straight across. That is a placement line for this piece of fabric. So if you can see, this piece of fabric is a little further back than it is to the front. I've got this space right here in the front. That's because I lined up that edge of that fabric with a line that was just on my stabilizer, okay? And then you can hold that down with temporary spray adhesive if you want to. You don't have to, but it can shift a little bit because it's a fairly large piece of fabric. So I like to hold it down with a little bit of a little bit of spray. But you can also pet your fabric. So when you're doing applique and embroidery and such, when you're dealing with pieces that might move, there's nothing wrong with petting your fabric, which just simply means as it stitches out, you want to just kind of move your fabric toward the outside. You're not impeding the hoop, you're not pressing down, you're just kind of smoothing out your fabric. So you're petting it as you go so that it will stay nice and smooth in front of the needle. Okay, and so you can do that too, or you can do a combination of both, which is usually what I do because I don't want anything to move. So you'll get that part done. That is stitch number 1, and then stitch number 2 holds that piece down. So that's just a rectangle that goes around this piece, okay? So that part's fairly simple. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to add the 2 pieces that fill the space at the bottom. The first of those 2 pieces is your pencil pocket. So this here is your pencil pocket that we did last week. And I'm going to go ahead and pull out this pin. We don't need the pin anymore. And we're going to line this pocket right sides together with your back and spine piece in the hoop. And we're going to align the bottom this bottom edge of this piece with our pocket and our pocket back. You can do them one at a time like I am. If you've basted them together, then you will obviously do them at the same time. This is the bottom of your notebook cover. This is the top of your notebook cover. So your pocket should be down toward this side. Okay, so just remember that. To the left is the bottom, to the right is the top. And that'll be important all the way through because you want your embroidery to also be right side up when you're finished. Okay, so we just line both of those up. Take your time, make sure they're aligned well, okay? And then you can, if you want to, you can slow down the speed of your machine. And so most machines these days do have speed control. This one's just a lever that's right next to your start-stop button. So you can slow it down a little bit if you think you might be nervous about it stitching across here. All it's going to do is it's going to do a bean stitch or a reinforced straight stitch right across, holding those in place. And I'm just going to Kind of pet them as it goes. Make sure everything stays in place. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take both of those pieces and we're going to pull them toward the bottom of the hoop. Okay, and you're going to get them as nice as you can. Now, there is nothing wrong with taking this hoop off of the machine and taking this to your iron and pressing it down. Just make sure that you don't touch your iron to the edges of your plastic hoop. Okay, get it down as good as you can. And I just, just finger press it good. It's all right. And if you starch these pieces ahead of time, I did not tell you this earlier, but if you starch these pieces ahead of time, or even right before you put this piece on, that will also help you to make these creases a little better. I happen to have a fabric that has a lot of sizing in it, and so it actually folds very nicely. A floppy, really super floppy fabric, that'll fold really nicely too. So it just depends on the fabric that you have. Okay, now our next line of stitching is going to go back, and it's going to just tack this piece down so that we don't have to worry about it going back where it was. Okay, so we're just going to start that. Again, I'm slowed down just a tad. Okay, now once that stitches out, we're about ready to put our piping on. So our next two stitches, one of them is going to be a placement line for our piping, and then we're going to glue our piping in place. And then the next one is going to stitch down the piping and the last piece that we need to complete our very front cover here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do this next line. Okay, now that line stitched just inside of toward the spine. It's stitched just inside the first line. So we're going to line up, our goal here is to line up the stitching of the piping with that second line of stitching, with the piping facing toward the spine and the pocket. Okay, so I'm not going to have the greatest angle here, so we're just going to hope that it works. And I may get in your way here for just a second, but I'm just going to put that. And my goal is to have the piping, the line of the stitching on the piping, matching that second line of stitching that's on the piece. So you can see if you just run it down, you can kind of line up the line of stitching on the piping with the line of stitching, that second line of stitching that's on your fabric. Okay. That seems pretty good. Now, we're not quite ready to do our next line of stitching yet. We are going to take our end piece and we're going to place that right sides together, just like we did the pocket with the spine. We're going to place this right sides together, with the pocket. So we have our piping sandwiched in between, and we've got the raw edges aligned here and on the sides as well. So everything lines up. Then when we do this next line of stitching, it's going to again do a reinforced straight stitch because this is one that needs to hold. It's going to do that, holding down the piping and this end piece. Okay, then we're once again going to pull the end piece away from your piping. That did pretty good for not having such a great angle. Okay. Okay, and then our next line of stitching is going to hold the other end of this piece down just like it did the pocket. Okay, there we go. Now we have one row of stitching, one color change left. That color change is just going to do a rectangle around the entire piece. That rectangle is going to tell us where we can embellish the entire front of this, the whole thing, not the entire front, the front and the back of our notebook cover. So what it is it's just it's kind of an outline that stitches just outside of where the final stitching will stitch that will put the piece together, or will put the entire notebook cover together. So it gives us kind of a design area. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch that out. I want you to stitch it out as well. And then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about that monogram. Okay, so our monogram design is this right here that's on the front of our notebook cover. And so you can do these monograms. The monogram and the shape around the monogram are built into our Continental M17, which is a fabulous thing. You can do them with this shape around it here. You can do it with several other shapes. You can also do them with only 2 letters, or you can do them with 3. So I'm going to show you how to do this. And so at our machine here, what you will do, this is where you are when you first go into embroidery mode on the machine. Up here, we have several different places where we can find designs. Behind the letters here are all of our fonts. And so we have several fonts that we can choose from. We also have some border designs, which are just little designs here. And there's a normal sew, which is some more little motif designs here. And then we have our 2-letter and our 3-letter monograms. So in this case, I chose a 3-letter monogram. And you can see down here at the bottom, there are different shapes that you can use, or different motifs that you can use around your monogram. So there's a leaf wreath here. There's the hexagon that we used. There's a couple of brackets, and then the small brackets. And then there's another page here as well with more designs. So you can choose from any of those. And so what we're going to do, I used anyways, the hexagon that's here on your screen right now. Then we're going to put in your letters, and you have to put the letters in the order in which you want them to appear. So remember, when you use a 3-letter monogram, your monogram is usually the last name in the middle and the first and middle on the left and right, respectively. So in my case, it was an A, and then a W, and then an L. And so that's how my monogram looks. Okay, now, one thing you can do, which I did not do, I'm going to go ahead and trash this at first, because remember, our notebook cover is sideways in our hoop. So we could create our monogram and then go into Embroidery Edit and rotate the design 90 degrees so that it is in the right location or the right orientation. Or if you look right down here, we can actually rotate it here. So there's an AB and an AB. So this means that your monogram is going to be sideways in the hoop. And this would be straight up and down in the hoop. So without having to do anything else, we can put it sideways right away. Okay, then I'm going to choose our shape here, and I'm going to put my letters back in. Okay. And then our monogram, you can see it's just tiny here, but that's our monogram right there. Okay, now if you wanted to do a different shape, you could. If you wanted to do 2 letters, you could. The process is exactly the same no matter what you do. You could also use borders, or you could use your normal sew where I showed you the little motifs. You could put a motif and then your letters and then another motif. It's up to you. There's all kinds of options you can do. The simplest thing though is just to choose one of the shapes that's given and then put your letters in. And that gives you a beautiful monogram, just automatic. Everything fits perfectly. You don't have to redo a thing. And then we're going to touch down here. We're just going to touch OK. It's going to move our carriage. You make sure your carriage is clear. And you can see that my monogram came up sideways. And so I'm not going to have to do a thing with it because I know that the bottom of my cover, my notebook cover, was on the left and the top was on the right. So this will be perfectly oriented to what I need. Now, your size. Our size is 78 by 77. We can see right there. So we know that this is going to be about 3 by 3. So, 25 millimeters is a decent shot at a 1 inch. It's not exact, but it'll give you close. So this is about 3 by 3. There's only one color to it, even though it looks like there's 2 colors on the screen, because it just gives you your outline shape and your letters in 2 different colors so you can see them well. But the design itself really is only going to be one color. And we're going to show you how to change a couple things there too. Now, the only other thing here that is going to stump us a little bit is right here. This fits in RE20D, which is your 100 by 100 hoop. That is not what we are using. We are using our largest hoop. So if we go into Embroidery Edit up at the top, so now we're in Embroidery Edit instead of Ready to Sew. Then down here we have our RE20D. We can touch that and then we can pick the correct hoop, which is the RE46D. Okay, and you'll see it's in this huge hoop and it's this little, looks like a tiny design in a huge hoop, which is essentially what it is. Then we'll touch OK there. Our hoop is going to move to center position for that hoop. And now you can see that it truly looks like it's one color because it's all ready to stitch out. Okay, so we're in Ready to Sew. And so we are ready to stitch this out at this point. So what we're going to do is we're going to reset here a little bit, and then I'm going to show you exactly how to stitch this out as an applique. Because if you look at mine here, we have a solid black background behind it. We actually made it into an applique, even though it is only one color and the whole thing is going to stitch out all at once. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. Okay, now that you have your monogram done, I'm going to show you how to create an applique out of that monogram. You could even just stitch it exactly like it is if you want to. It's going to stitch the shape and then it's going to stitch the letters. And I only know that because I've stitched it out several times at this point. But, and this is also why I can show you how to make an applique out of it as well. But when we were going over the supplies, I told you that there was a point at which we were going to have to float a piece of tearaway stabilizer under our hoop in order to support the decorative stitches better. Well, this is part of our decorative stitching. And so we're going to have a whole lot of very heavy satin stitching that happens with this monogram. And so we're going to float another piece of stabilizer. This is a tearaway. Remember, we have cutaway in our hoop. And we are going to it just gives a little more stability to the extra stitches that we're going to add at this point. So to float a piece of stabilizer, all you are going to do is you're going to take the stabilizer, you're going to lift the corner of your hoop, and you're just going to lay it underneath so that it covers the entire underside of your hoop. So we're just going to lift and just kind of work it back there until it is underneath your hoop. So it didn't need to be big enough. That piece didn't need to be big enough to fit in the hoop. It only needed to be big enough to fit under your fabric here. So, and like you saw, I didn't lift the hoop far. Don't lift it really far. You'll wind up distorting everything. You just lift it enough to be able to get your stabilizer under there. Your first few stitches are going to lock that stabilizer into the fabric and the stabilizer below, and you're not going to worry about it a bit. It's just a little added, it's really a little added insurance that you're not going to get a bunch of puckers. So I think it's well worth the effort of putting that under there. All right, so our monogram is ready to stitch out. We've changed our hoop so that it's this size hoop. Everything is ready to go. So what we're going to do, we don't want to stitch the monogram right in the middle. Our design here is set up so that your bumps that are here on the sides of the hoop that show where the horizontal center of your embroidery unit is the spine. It's the very edge of the spine of your composition notebook that will go in there. So you know that anything that is below those two marks is going to be on the front of your cover, and anything behind them or to the back of them in this hoop is going to be on the back of your cover. It's a very easy delineation between the two. So we want our monogram, we know it's about 3 by 3. We want it to be toward the bottom and in the front. Now, do you have to put yours there? No, absolutely not. This is your cover. This one is my cover. So I'm going to put it where I want. You can put your monogram wherever you want it. If you want it on the back, put it on the back. If you want it smack dab in the middle of the front, put it smack dab in the middle of the front. So I'm going to put mine though where mine was on the sample so that you can see how I got there. Okay. So I want mine to be somewhere in this area down here. So I am going to move this using the movement arrows on the screen. I'm just going to move it down and over to the left until the center is where I want it. Your needle is in the center of your design right now. So you're moving the center of your design to where you want the center of your design to fall on the machine or on the fabric. Okay, and I think I'm good with right there. Okay, so I'm about halfway between the mark and my pocket. So I'm somewhere around halfway between those. So that horizontal mark that shows me where my spine is in the pocket. We're going to do the first part of our stitching. Now remember I said it's going to do the shape around the monogram, and then it's going to do the letters. What it does, what the design does, is it does straight stitching around the shape, and then it starts to go into its satin stitching. So if we let it go until it is all the way around and starts the satin stitching, we can stop the machine to place our fabric, and then we can restart the design to do that shape again, which gives us what can be considered a tack down in the applique. Stop the design in the same place, trim, and then just continue on. And so that's what I'm going to show you here, because if you've never done this before, it's kind of a neat trick. And if you've done it before, then you'll be old hat. So anyways, what we're going to do first is we are going to go ahead and stitch the beginning of this design. And I'm going to stitch until it reaches where it's going to start doing its satin stitching. And I am going to speed the machine back up because I'm not worried about anything moving at this point. Okay, So I don't know if you noticed, but it went all the way around and then it started to do that satin stitch. And that's where I stopped it, was after about 1 or 2 satin stitches. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna get this one thread out of our way. I'm gonna cut my threads using the scissor button that's on the front of the machine. Oh, that one got stuck. Okay. Then I'm going to place my fabric. This is my applique fabric. It's just solid black. I'm going to place it down so that it is covering that entire shape, that entire straight stitch shape. Then on my screen, I'm going to go back to the beginning of stitch number 1. So on your screen, there is a box where you can change your stitch number. And there is a needle with a number next to it where you can just put in a number. And I'm going to put in 0. And it goes right back to the beginning. Okay? Then we're going to go ahead and start again. We're going to let it do the same thing it did the first time. And we're going to stop there. And we're going to go ahead and actually cut with your scissors so that it cuts the thread. Get the thread out of your way. Then you're going to take your applique scissors, whichever ones you like, and you're going to trim around the outside edges of that stitch, fairly close to the stitching, but try not to actually cut the stitching itself. Okay, and you can do this here like I'm doing it, or if you can't reach well when it's underneath the needle, you can remove your hoop and pull it toward you so that you've got all this flat surface here. You can use it. Pull it toward you. And I may not be getting this quite close enough. You'll take a little more time than I am. Okay, then we don't need to go back to the beginning and do that whole straight stitch once again. We can actually just go back a few stitches. So in that same box that's on your screen where you found the needle and the pound sign or the number sign, you are going to just go back a few stitches using the plus minus. So you're going to touch the minus 5, 6 times to go back. You want to just go back to where you're in those straight stitches some. Okay, I'm about 3 or 4 stitches back into the straight stitches. And then you're just going to touch your start stop. Okay, then what's going to happen from here is the machine is going to stitch all of the satin stitching for the shape, the rest of the satin stitching, and then it's going to go on and it's going to stitch the letters. Now, if you wanted your letters to be in a different color, you could also do the same stopping trick and have it go stitch your letters. But I just did mine all in one color. I really just have one accent color here, and so I used it for the entire thing. So I'm going to let mine go here. You're going to go ahead and finish up your monogram as well. And then when we come back next week, we are going to talk about how to get all of the tiny little stitches in our polka dots. And also on the back of our notebook cover, we're going to talk about how to use the spirograph type designs and the dots together as a design element as well. And then we will also finish up that particular notebook cover. So you get yours done, I'll get mine done, and I will see you next week.